Nice to see you all. My name's Paul Ballard, and I run a company called 3DI, have been for about 10 years. So I apologise for the title. It's when you write these things months ago and they get published, you have to stick with them, but I realise it's actually rhetorical, really, and so the natural answer is yes. I guess my belief is that localization, by which I mean the stuff around translation, so I don't mean just the words, I mean the process that the translation is part of, that is key to your ability to satisfy the needs of your customers around the world. And I'll be going into more detail about the differences between translation and localization, but I'll first want to position why I think exporting is such a great opportunity for technology businesses. I've got a couple of case studies of companies where localization and their embracement of it has been a key part to their success as exporters, and then I've got some practical tips and hints to help you in your planning for exporting, where localization is going to be a factor. So I guess my starting point is that as a big number, people say you should put numbers in presentations. Here's a very, very big number that's very, very small. The UK accounts for just 1% of the world population, but we seem to be extremely good at exporting, have done for a very long time. We're very, very good at things like construction and football rights and luxury products, consumer goods, medical devices, telecoms products. There's a whole stack of technologies, of areas of life that people around the world want from us. They actually want our stuff. To some extent, our job as UK PLC is just to make it really, really easy for them to buy it and to get it and to understand it and to thrive on it, just as we do. So I guess that we should be in a better position to export. The CBI says all those kind of industries I just gave you, those are all industries that the CBI positions as industries that should be growing for export. But I guess my key point is that even if you're not in one of those industries, if your clients are in those industries, so if you're a training company, if you're a consultancy, and you provide services to the telecom sector, the retail sector, and they're exporting, then gear yourselves up and align yourselves with their export strategies, and business will come to you. You just got to make it very, very easy, and this is what I'm going to be talking about. So, and even the government wants us to export. They've got 4 themes to how they're going to help us grow, apparently, and everyone's been moaning about, oh, we've got to have growth. And they say one of the third thing on their list, and this is from their website, is we want to make it possible for companies in the UK to export. And actually, they are pretty good at helping you if you want to export. So they do provide lots of help, and actually we've actually used some of that help over the years. They have some great schemes out of the DTI that help you set yourselves up and design your products, your processes, your services to be attractive and to be usable by people in other countries. So it's everyone's saying we should be doing it. The other thing is that it is good for you. It is actually, this is some data from a survey done in 2011, and what you've got there is a graph that the red bars are the exporters and the grey bars are those non-exporters, and it's showing on the left in the last 12 months what growth companies reported, and on the right hand side what growth companies expect in the next 12 months. So all the red bars are higher than the grey bars. Basically, if you export, you'll grow more. Now that principle applies, the data shows, not this data, but the other, same as a survey, that applies whatever industry you're in and whatever size of business you're in. So companies that export, no matter what size you are, you'll grow more. And the other bit of data is that if you export, the first time exporters inevitably become about 30% more efficient. So just the very effort of going through a process of exporting makes you and drives you to be more efficient. And it's working. We are getting better. Just in the 3 quarters of last year, the first 3 quarters of last year, Britain is now Germany's biggest trading partner around the world. We overtook France for the first time in the modern age, and that's a big deal given what we all hear about the Franco-German axis of power and the political history they have there. But British companies are plugged into the German industrial machine, if you like, and when Germany exports, we export. Okay, so in most unexpected ways, British companies are benefiting from global trade. And really, if you're not already exporting or you're playing at it and it feels hard, there are almost certainly things you can do to try and make it easy for yourself. It's kind of still have lots to learn though about exporting, and this is just another bit of fact is that bizarrely, and if you're not familiar with BRIC, that's Brazil, Russia, India and China, who are considered the kind of superpowers of fast economic growth around the world. And we still export more to Ireland, or did in 2011, than we do to those 4 countries combined. So we're clearly not quite doing everything as beautifully as we could, and we're not positioning ourselves as companies in the UK to take advantage of the massive growth happening not just in the BRIC countries, but in other countries that are growing strongly around the world. The other thing on this point is that actually only out of SMEs, and actually just as a show of hands, how many of you work for companies where you'd consider yourself an SME in some way? Okay, a handful of you. So some of you are huge then. Clearly some of you are huge global superpowers, and that's great to know. But only 20% of SMEs in the UK currently export, and virtually all of that is to Europe. So there's a huge untapped potential for large companies, but also small and medium-sized companies to gear themselves up to be able to export. I'm going to take a sip of this, excuse me. So I've set the scene a little bit, saying exporting is good for you, we should do more of it, we're actually pretty good, we could be doing more. And I guess I've now got to make the link between, well, so what's localization got to do with that? And this is the key here. If you and your companies can answer yes to any one of these questions, then firstly, you're very well set up to export, because you're probably providing something which is hard to replicate. You're probably providing something which has a competitive advantage inherent in it, whether it's a service, whether it's a product. And secondly, you're almost certainly going to benefit from thinking about language as localization as opposed to as translation. So if you can answer yes to any one of those, more power to you if you can say yes to any more than one of them, then you're well set up for export, and you're almost certainly going to benefit from localization having a bigger impact on your business. So just coming back to this distinction between localization, translation, localization. Translation, if you like, and I am being very simplistic here, is fundamentally about the words. Localization is about the process within which those words sit. So it's everything to do with taking a product, content or documentation and making it work just as beautifully, just as elegantly, and having just the same impact on the customer as you would expect of your customer in the UK or the US. It's this principle of, why would you expect anybody in another country to buy something from you if you can't even be bothered to not only put it in their language, but actually make them feel like you didn't do it as an afterthought? And that is, to be honest with you, historically, one of the ways in which UK companies tend to approach translation is it's a thing, oh my God, we've got to translate it into German. That German customer won't stop asking me to have the website in German, the online help in German. He even wants the UI in German. Goodness me, don't they speak English? The point is, and the trap we fall into is, for many of the industries, people do speak English, but they don't speak it well enough to feel that I guess either if you're trying to persuade them to do something, you need to speak in their language. If what you're trying to convey is a complex concept, you need to speak in their language. And so as soon as you apply that principle throughout all the touch points that your customers have in your process, then all of a sudden you've got to think about a process, not think about just, I'll translate those words. Because what it does, it pulls together all the elements, all the things that can help you be more efficient. It forces you to think and challenge some of the assumptions that you've got about the way, who owns the content, what's its life, why did we write it in the first place, You get into terrible habits of writing stuff in English because somebody asked for it 5 years ago, and you keep updating it. Localization forces you, when you realize you've got to create 20 language versions of it, or even just 3 language versions of it, it forces you to go, actually, do we really need to write this down in English, let alone then maintain it forever in German or Russian or Chinese? So that's just one way in which it pulls things together. But it also makes you have to think about, well, wait a minute, there's some people here who own the content, they're developing the content of our training, and we've got our customer who's signed off on the content, and we've got some development guys who own the skin of our e-learning environment, and how do we get all of those words that are sitting within all those different places, how do we get them plugged in together? And localization as a discipline, if you like, and as a process, gets all those elements working together. So I'm going to use, because I don't know how you think about concepts, I'm actually going to be referring to this difference between translation and localization in a number of different ways. And to some extent, I've started saying translation's words, localization is process. Another way to think about it is that translation is tactical, localization is strategic. Okay, so it does expect you to be looking at things in a slightly different way. So just to give you an example industry. Does anybody work in the video games industry here? I'm guessing not, but some of you may? No, okay. So the video games industry, we're actually pretty good at video games. I'm terrible at video games. My 17-year-old son is brilliant at them, but I can't do the thing. I'm like that with video games. I can't do them. But the UK is brilliant at making and developing video games. And from the start, we were export oriented. From the start, virtually I think it's 95% of video game developers in the UK export. 45% of the revenue from UK video games manufacturers comes from export markets. So they have established within that industry a whole set of norms around how you create multilingual versions of product. It's just part of the way they do it. They don't even think about, should we do it into German this year? They know they've got a ready market and they have to create it in 30 languages because that's what the market expects. So localization disciplines and habits are part of that industry and have been for many, many years. There aren't many other industries in the UK where that can be said. So the video games almost leads the way. Strangely, 3DI has absolutely no video games clients. And the reason for that is that they're too good at it, to be frank. When you get to a level of maturity within where translation and localization is plugged almost into your DNA as a company, you stop needing so much the external expertise that helped you get there. So actually, we don't have any clients, which is a bit embarrassing. But they know what they're doing. Whereas many industries, technology industries, training industries, it still feels like hard work to create multilingual versions of what they do, and that's why companies like 3DI exist. Okay, so it's another one of my ways of trying to make you think about localization slightly differently. It's going to become an imperative. It's not something you can choose to do. You're just going to have to do it at some point. It's all a matter of when. It may be that you decide to do it before you do your first language and you start to think of it as localization. You may wait until you're trying to do it in 15 languages and you've been through several bosses and you've been through various people who have left and had to leave early for health reasons. Whatever reason, if you are going to be exporting more, you are going to have to stop translating and start localizing. Because translation will become a burden. It will become the thing around your neck that feels like the hardest thing in the world. And think about it in terms of localization that will become your friend, if you like, and will help you along the way. So I've been very cheeky, and we have got a few clients, thankfully, even if they're not in the video industry. But we do have, I've got 2 case studies just to share with you, just to give you an insight. So Nuclear, they're actually exhibiting here. They're a long-standing exhibitor here at Learning Technologies. They're focused on providing compliance e-learning and instructor-led training. And many of their companies are big banks or companies who have a global presence. We started working with them about 6-7 years ago when they weren't doing much in the way of translation, and they were thinking about it in terms of translation at that time. And they had some expert tools developers, expert content developers and engineers creating really, really good, high quality e-learning. And they, over a number of years, have moved into a localization paradigm, if you like, and thinking about multilingual versions of what they produce as simply part of their process. And we set it up now with them so that they use us when they need to and don't use us when they don't need to. And that works very well. So they're now at a point where they have an engineering team, they have some linguistic requirements. Each of their clients has a different idea of what quality means. And so we have ways of turning on, turning off our service to suit the way they work. And it means now they can provide services to their clients involving 15 to 20 languages at a single release. That's because they think of it as a process rather than as translation. And I can highly recommend them. They're just down there. They're very, very good. Completely different. Raymarine. How many? Actually, I always like to ask a question. How many of you heard of Raymarine? Okay. How many of those who've heard of Raymarine have a boat? Yes. Okay. That's it. So if you have a boat, if you have one of those, or a yacht, or even if you have a little cruiser, then you'll almost certainly have a bit of Raymarine kit on your boat, and that bit of that kit helps you find fish if you're a fisherman. It helps you navigate around shallow waters. Basically, these are very, very complex bits of software and hardware that effectively are used around the world. They're world leaders in this technology, have been for many, many years. And their world used to be that their distributor network was so powerful and so ran the sense of what Raymarine was in a particular market that they developed their own sense of, this is what I want for my German market, this is what I want for Malaysia, this is what I want for Russia, this is what I want for Turkey. And it got to a point a number of years ago where they realized that they really had to pull it back in-house. They really had to pull and centralize this idea of the multilingual versions of their brand. Because basically, the bits of kit, as they sit on top of the boat, and the technology that people actually see day to day is the screen that shows them where the fish is. It's the documentation, the user guide, that when they're sitting there on their boat, they've got to read something. They'd be reading the manual, and they were realizing that people all over the world someone had very poor manuals, some of them had very good ones. Sometimes the manual was in the same language as the software, sometimes it wasn't. So they effectively, the steps they took was that they started off by focusing on changing one thing. And this is one of the things that you can start working out, how do I go from this big scary situation to a situation that's better? And of course you can't change everything, you can't persuade every stakeholder that your way is right. So you look at what you can control, you look at what you can change, you change that. And they had an inspirational tech comms guy called Andy, and Andy was a tech author. He had to run a very small team, and he persuaded the bosses to buy a DITA-oriented content management system that you could write modular chunks of text. So all the stuff they translated, they went to a model of creating very highly modular sets of content for that user guide. And they started with that. And all of a sudden, when they had that working in a modular way, we plugged in as the translation supplier, and we helped them translate it and create a set of assets that they could then start using. And they developed, they did it for a few markets first, did it with Poland, because they knew the guy in the market there. Then they did it with Turkey, and they did it with a few key markets, and got people bought into this new process. And once it had established itself, it rolled off, it took off. So now, probably 3 years down track, they've now got every country where they export plugged into this process, where all the user guides, the online help, is now translated and localized at the same time in a coordinated way. And we've now got to the point where we've persuaded the development guys that actually this process is quite handy. So the software developers now use a similar process to manage the strings of text that appear in the software. So that's another one. We started now working with the marketing guys because they've thought, oh, this looks more efficient. So all of a sudden it's a way of changing behaviors in your organization. I think it's 90, I think we translate, or rather, they create 12 language versions. I fall into the habit of saying translate. Basically, they're creating 12 language versions of the docs and 19 language versions of the UI. So it is scalable, highly scalable. Okay, here's a really complex. I put something. It doesn't really matter if you can't see the text. Okay, this is just an example of what a localization process might look like. It starts at the top left, and it finishes at the bottom right. The circles, doesn't really matter if you can't read. That's other processes. So this is just a localization process, and it plugs in to other processes. So it plugs into terminology management. It plugs into the software internationalization, which is the bit of the process you use to make your software really easy to translate. And it plugs into the English technical authoring. So this is for a software company, and the translation doesn't start until up here somewhere. Okay, so there's all this stuff that happens before you even get to translating anything. And that's just to give you some sense as to that localization is about a process and getting people throughout the business involved. If you can see the color differences, the blue boxes are things that the customer does, and the purple boxes are the things that 3DI have been doing. But this is an example. It obviously differs for every customer. So these are we're getting into the detail, the takeaway stuff, the bits that you want to jot down and refer to. I'm happy to give you these slides, of course, afterwards if you'd like. It's more than happy to do that. So my colleagues and I have tried to think hard. How do we just without doing bullets, how do we come down to 3 or 4 key things that you can do as an approach to move towards a localization model to help you make it easier for you to export or to support your customers who are exporting? Agree a strategy. Okay, so that's basically about get people involved early on, both internally and get some external experts involved. You want to write and build with localization in mind. So you want to recognize that whatever you create in the other languages is effectively part of your IP, it's part of your asset. Why would you just play with it? Why would you not do it seriously? Why would it not be part of your strategic planning? So think of it as a strategy and get localization issues plugged into your strategic discussions in your company. Prioritize and plan. So this is about really having to make some hard choices, because you can't do everything at once. You can't change everyone's mind the first time round. You can't persuade the guy who runs the German market that this new way is better. So you need to pick your targets, pick your easy wins, and work out what's going to have the biggest impact on people. Also agree what quality means. Okay, you're going to be quite fussy about actually what are they really bothered about? What would we mean when we say providing quality documentation? Okay, what is the measure, and what does it matter to somebody in Turkey? What does it matter to somebody in Russia? What do they expect? What's their idea of quality? You might find they expect less than your UK technical writing team has been telling you everyone must have. So ask the customers, get them plugged in, and help you to plan and prioritize what you're going to spend resources on. When you see complexity, try and challenge it. So when you say, oh no, this is way too difficult, this is way, we can't possibly do that, there is always a way. Okay, companies have been doing this for a long time. There are virtually, I would challenge to say that anybody has a situation where they think, oh, no one's ever been through this before. Believe me, there are lots of translation, localization companies out there, like us, like other companies here, who would have seen your challenges before and will be able to help solve them for you. And there'll also be other companies in your similar industries who also would have been through the pain before. Get out there and talk to people. Have some basis for challenging the complexity that your colleagues in business, your people in other markets say are in the way of a unified process. And actually, you need to start to learn to share the problems. Don't feel you've got to solve it all yourself. Okay? Now, when you start working with a partner, translation partner, localization partner, it's very hard to measure based on price how they're going to help you solve the problems. So there are ways in which you can try and understand how they're going to be as a problem solver for you and to help you get to where you want the company to go. Okay, we're down to the last 5 minutes. So I've got the last 2 or 3 slides. So this is just I'll give you an example of what a process looks like. I'm going to give you a very, very, I guess, flippant view of this is what a strategy looks like. So this is the scenario is this is for a software company. It's highly configurable bit of kit. What I recommend is get it on the agenda with your distributors very, very early. It's very tempting when you're exporting that with your distributor in Brazil, you don't bother raising the thorny question of whether they want it in Portuguese or not, because you don't want them to say yes. Okay? You have to be brave, get it on the agenda early in the discussions with your route to market and have it part of the agenda. It gives you a negotiating position later on. Who's going to pay for it? So get it on the agenda early. Also, start working with a company that knows what it's doing and start testing early. Test your software, see how easy it is to create a Portuguese version. Test your training materials. How would it need to be localized for the local markets? Just do little tests. Won't take much time, but it starts giving you traction and starts giving you negotiating strength in your discussions internally. Start making priority decisions about actually what do they really care about. Are we doing this because we have to, because the regulators say we've got to register this product in the local language? Or are they saying, are we doing this because actually our biggest competitor is already translating their material and we need to do it just to keep up? And you don't need to view it as an all or nothing. And I got translation there specifically there as the thing. You don't have to worry about translating all 100,000 words of a user guides. Okay, you build up from the things that really matter. And this is just an idea of a sequence in which you might, as a software company, only translate the stuff that really matters at the time. If you're selling to Spain for the first time, you've got a big Spanish customer. Okay, what ask them, we don't have it in Spanish yet, what would be the biggest priority for you to have it? Would you like the UI, would you like the marketing materials in Spanish and have a Spanish speaking sales guy? That'd be an easy one. But then build up through the software, build up through your e-learning content, through your products, and tick off things as you go. Now, the catch is, the only way to do this is to do that. Okay? You've got to have your English structured in a way that means all of that is possible. But if you have got your English structured in a way that's very easy for you to chop and change and mix things together, you can do all of those things and do it step by step and reuse all the translations you've done before. Okay, so this is don't be afraid to ask people like me these sorts of questions. Okay, and there are a handful of localization and translation companies here at this event, and if you're going to start worrying about it, ask them these sorts of questions. Okay, I'm just going to put these up here because I'll let you read them. With the quality thing, by the way, ask to see their list of stuff they've done wrong. Okay, if they run an ISO 9001 2008 quality process, they should be prepared to show you things that have gone wrong in some form. So, if they're not capturing the things that have gone wrong, they're not really working to quality. You want your life to be easier. What are they specifically going to do to make it easy for you? Another key thing is their human resources, the company that's working for you, put it this way, it doesn't really matter if you're in a specialist industry, it doesn't really matter that they do or don't have a translator sitting in their office in High Wycombe, or wherever it may be, that speaks Russian and happens to know everything about aerospace industry. That's not a measure of a good localization company. Okay, what you want to understand is that the linguistic quality is plugged in somehow. It doesn't matter, ideally you want that guy in Russia sitting in Russia and being someone who used to work in the airline industry in Russia. And that's what good translation is, that's where it's most likely to come from, is people who really understand your domain. Okay, we're just about there. Thorny question, machine translation. Yes, it can be done, but your content has to be very structured and very mature and easily controlled in English in order for machine translation to be of any use whatsoever. So but it's a reasonable question to ask, is to understand that how is that company plugged into understanding the latest developments in machine translation. That's us done. Thank you very much. Basically, these are the three things, I guess the things I'd like to take away, is that translation will become your enemy and localization can be your friend. Localization is affordable and it's scalable and it's something that you can easily outsource. So it plugs very well into your businesses, whatever your model. And the best localization expertise just like telecoms and banking, is in the UK. And in fact, we're just over there at stand 78. So thank you very much indeed. I hope you have a good rest of conference, and good afternoon.